back to the ADCC Update Show, the Black Ops division of the Jiu-Jitsu world. With me as always, we got Sinbad over here, Professor Sinbad. Over on the side desk, we got a new little entrant into this world for you. Slack over there is going to be holding it down for us. And then in our guest spot, we got two-time ADCC champion Giancarlo Bodoni. Everybody give it up for Giancarlo. Let's go. Giancarlo, thanks for joining us, bro. How's everything been since you captured that second title?
Everything's been pretty good, yeah. So obviously it was a long year getting ready for ADCC. It was a long 2 years actually, and then we had the event, which was crazy, obviously, as you guys saw. And then I had a couple weeks to kind of have some downtime and chill out. And now we're kind of back in the swing of things, and I'm excited to see what's next for me as far as competitions go.
Yeah, so I think at this point, kind of everyone knows the new wave style of training, obviously. It's very ADCC focused almost all the time, but it's 7 days a week, the classic, like if you're feeling tired, just come in and train a little light, don't go as hard. But from the moment you won the 2022 ADCC World Championship, how much of a break did you give yourself? How much of a downtime was there, or like a focus on other things before it became all about the 2024 ADCC Worlds? Yeah,
so different than this year. I was actually talking in training yesterday to Davis, and he was mentioning that literally the day after ADCC, I flew out of Vegas straight to Austin and went straight to the training room. So I did like a training session immediately following ADCC. And after a tournament like that, I had like 8 matches, I think or 7 matches or something like that last time. And obviously going through a full training camp, your body's all banged up. You're a little tired and sore from the after party a little bit. And so I definitely, and I had EBI coming up after that. So I was already booked for like 2, or I think I had booked EBI was like 3 or 4 weeks out after ADCC. And then I had the match with Mourinho that I had to postpone because I got injured. So I had kind of 2 things back to back that were already planned. So I couldn't really take time off. Whereas this time I had planned ahead of time, like months ahead of time. I was like, everything stops after ADCC. Like I needed to like put all my chips in one basket, be ready for this tournament, and then reassess once things are over. Both for my body, because I had some injuries over the last year that I needed to make sure that I was healed before I can go back into competition, especially after winning another title. You're only going to get really, really big matches and big tournaments. So I wanted to make sure that I could have full camps. I wasn't just going in kind of coasting and being in shape. I wanted to have time to work on new skills, and I wanted to just be mentally and physically as fresh as possible. So I put it in my mind that I was going to take a little bit of a break from competition, not necessarily from training, but from competition after ADCC for an undetermined amount of time. Not like, taking a year off or anything like that, but just at least a couple months that I could like make sure that I had time to go into a training camp as fresh as possible and just kind of play around in the gym and work on picking up new things, which I think for me was one of the biggest kind of catalysts to my success, both for this 2022 and 2024, was that I had a whole bunch of different new skills, and I wasn't the same grappler. Like if you look at a lot of the techniques that were successful for me in 2022 versus 2024, like it was just kind of a different, although like, the positions are the same. I had just added new tools to my tool belt, so to speak. And so I feel like that's kind of really, really important. We don't really have a season and an off season in jiu-jitsu. It's kind of like pick and choose your tournaments as they come. And so I felt as though I would be in a position to where I could, have some time and say, after ADCC, I'm just going to take that time, a couple weeks, a little bit of downtime, get back in the training room, reassess how am I feeling, what worked, what didn't work, what were my strengths, what were my weaknesses, what do I need to improve on? And then it's all, for me, like ADCC and those world titles are the most important ones, and those are the ones that I feel like I do the best job of peaking for, or for the tournaments that matter. And so I wanted to make sure that I put myself in a position to where, I'd be in the best state to be able to be in the driver's seat and really perform well for those. So right now, I'm back in the training room now, and I have some travels coming up, but I'll still be training that whole time, and focused on recovery, but also focus on my teaching and my own skills.
For sure. So we were talking a little bit a bit before the show. You know, this time you wrapped up ADCC. We saw you at the airport actually flying in. You had some big ass suitcases.
Yeah.
This man was coming with the whole wardrobe.
Yeah.
But you went and spent some time in Canada, spent some time in Colorado. What was all that like? What were you out there doing?
So my wife's family's from Canada, and to be fair, like 80% of the stuff in the suitcases was hers, just so you guys know.
Yeah, sure.
But,
What about your bow, though? What about your bow? You brought your bow, right?
I did bring my bow, yeah, but that was a separate case. So yeah, I set aside some time to be able to go and just visit family and have some downtime. So we basically planned for a week in Vegas, 2.5-ish weeks in Canada, and then a week in Colorado where I went by myself. So normally I'm like throw everything in a backpack. Like I'm a pretty minimalist traveler, but we did have to, like, I had to have my bow with me. That requires a whole a whole case for that, and then we had both of our stuff, so we did have quite a bit of stuff that I had to bring with me, and so we had planned to take a good amount of stuff because we were going to be away for a while.
For sure. I think there's no better feeling than whenever you're traveling somewhere, fitting everything into a backpack. Like, it's just so satisfying, just like cruising through the airport, backpack on, got your hands free, no rolly bag, nothing. That's the best feeling for me, at least, is that backpack travel. But was it nice to, disconnect from the jiu-jitsu world a little bit? I'm sure like your phone probably wasn't working and all that. Like, I guess maybe. What's the difference in becoming a first-time ADCC champion 2022 and afterwards? I'm sure you want to ride that momentum a little bit, but then this time you kind of became two-time and then almost went dark in a way, you know, went out into the backcountry.
Yeah, I was like off the grid for a while, and it did feel good. Like for me, I'm pretty low key, like in my day-to-day life. Like I like to keep, things pretty private. Like I don't really live as much as honestly I should in like the virtual world. So I feel as though like for me having that time, especially, when I was in Colorado, like, we're up in the mountains, you don't really have service. So you're pretty much just using like a satellite phone, and I'm texting one or two people like, hey, here are my coordinates in case you don't hear from me in like 5 days. Come send somebody, you know what I mean? But it felt good. I felt like, I was just kind of refreshed mentally. Not that I was overwhelmed in any way. Like I love kind of the stress and the adrenaline and the everything that comes with competition and the preparation. That's why I do it, just because I do enjoy it. So it's not something that I was particularly overwhelmed with, but it is also nice to have, hobbies outside of training, hobbies outside of jiu-jitsu, and stuff that I really have only been able to really like immerse myself in the last year or two, because, for multiple reasons. One, you're on the climb to try to, achieve something, and then staying there and staying in that peak condition and peak performance does take a lot, out of you. But when Slack spent a couple days, filming with me, we talked about it a lot. And for me, from a mental side and just, having a few things outside of jiu-jitsu to be able to like take my focus off of has been really, really good, because it does really like engulf like 95% of my day every single day, which I love. But I feel as though you can always do better in that area if you just pull yourself away from it. Sometimes you need to kind of move yourself to something, shift laterally a little bit to then come back to something with like a fresh mind and a different perspective to be able to like really just go 100% and perform well. So it's definitely been beneficial for me, and it's something that I want to do a lot more without taking away from jiu-jitsu.
For sure. And it was cool seeing that video Slack made, you out doing the bow course, all that. Yeah. And he's been raving about your mom's pasta sauce. So Slack, give us the official review, all right? Don't bump the numbers up because Giancarlo's here. What's the review on the Bodoni mother's pasta sauce?
I'm going to keep it real. I'm going to give it a 10 out of 10. 10 out of 10 on the puccia sauce. All right. So shout out to Giancarlo's mom. If you want the best pasta sauce there is, you got to get some puccia sauce. I'm looking at the website right now. It's not fully set up. Maybe look her up on Instagram. Maybe I'll be honest. I actually ate my last jar of it 2 nights ago. My personal favorite is the spicy sauce.
Nice.
So spicy tomato sauce. I'm gonna have to hit you and
You
Rebecca
should have
up
told
for
me
some
because
more.
I would have brought you.
Yeah. My wife is super bummed that we ran out of it.
I've got boxes of it at home.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Tell us a little bit about that, like about growing up with the family restaurant in Florida, right?
Yeah, so I mean, I grew up pretty much like from a really young age, just working. We had like a small like family restaurant, and I grew up in Dade County, Miami, and that's pretty much what we did, And so like it's pretty interesting for me because I don't like cooking, maybe because I started doing it from a pretty young age. So it's not something that like I'm particularly passionate about, but I do love eating. So that was always really good. Like I grew up, so my mom's not Italian, but obviously my name and stuff does suggest that, I come from a pretty like Italian background. So my dad's side of the family is Italian. And so I kind of grew up with just a very like traditional kind of like Italian household, if you will. Like I was pretty much raised by my grandmother. She lived with us, my dad's mom, since we were born. And so my parents were always working. And even, when I was like before I was even a teenager, my parents split up. My grandmother always lived with us. And so she pretty much like was the one that like, she bottle fed us, like she raised us. She would like cook us breakfast, lunch, and dinner, like really, really traditional, like Italian old lady. And so for me, that's something that I've always been kind of exposed to. And, my mom, she was kind of introduced to that later in her life. She's always been very like creative and artistic and stuff like that. But as far as cooking, that wasn't like what she grew up doing. And so she started doing that later in life, a few years before I was born. And so we were always kind of exposed to, very fortunately, exposed to good food. And now that I'm like a pro athlete and I have to like, cut weight and stuff, I don't really get to enjoy that as much. So it is nice that I have to, to be able to go back to that. And, it's something that I do really enjoy.
Do you have a go-to dish that like, I feel like a lot of times when someone doesn't really love cooking, but they were raised around that stuff, they at least have one dish that's like they can nail that if they need to impress somebody. Like maybe like when you took your wife on you guys' first date, you're like, oh, let me cook you, this meal right here.
Well, we like, so when I was growing up, like, I did not have like a performance like diet. Like now I have like a nutritionist that's like, you got to have these macros and these freaking vitamins and like you should have these much levels of minerals and vitamins in your blood and stuff like that. Like, so I kind of like hand the reins off to him in that aspect. But I grew up like very, very like carb heavy freaking diet. Like, breakfast, it was like bread and pasta like every single day.
Yeah.
So that's definitely one of my favorite things. But as far as like things that I like to cook, I keep it as simple as possible. Like funny enough, like if I had to pick one thing, like if you had to put like pasta in front of me or like a steak, I'm usually like a steak guy. So I like to throw steaks on a grill, and like that's like what I would like enjoy cooking. I actually do enjoy like grilling and cooking steaks. But I feel like I have a good kind of blend of both. Like I have the like very like Italian side where it's pasta and pizzas and breads and all, like olive oil on everything as much as possible. And then, I have the other side, which is, if I did have to pick something that I do enjoy cooking, I'd say probably it'd have to be steaks.
It's hard to beat a good grilled steak, honestly.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll get a Giancarlo cooking show. Maybe we got to get a Flo cooking show going.
I know. Yeah, we should do a freaking a grilling podcast.
That would be awesome. Sitting around grilling. Corey's got a little bit. He's got a wood fire. Is it wood fire pizza?
Gas fire pizza.
Gas fire.
Oh yeah, those are sweet.
That thing in the backyard is just like, it's been a lifesaver a couple nights, because growing up in New York, right, you miss the real pizza.
Yeah.
Out here in Austin, just they don't have it. Sorry guys. It's not here.
It's not the place for Italian food for sure.
No, it's true. We were talking about this earlier because Reed's from Rhode Island, and he just came back and he was like, yeah, I had some good Italian food, good pizza on the East Coast. It's like in Austin, I've never really had good Italian food here, but a lot of times you show up to a place and they have like some weird hipster spin on Italian where it's like, bro, I just want like just traditional. Like give me like a rigatoni or something.
I'm a
I don't know what this is.
100%.
Like,
yeah.
If you're in Austin, you just got to stick to the tacos.
Yeah.
Tacos are unbeatable here.
Yeah.
But
Tacos are barbecue pretty much.
That's true. Yeah. A little Terry Blacks. Can't go wrong with some Terry Blacks.
Cannot go wrong.
That's
I love
right.
Terry Blacks.
All right, you want to get into some of the specifics on your ADCC run? So I pulled a highlight from just kind of your first 3 matches, and then we'll watch the J-Rod one kind of separately because that was crazy. But I was wondering if we could just kind of run through this. You can talk us through a little bit about this. You kind of had some interesting matches where, it was like a lot of dudes who can just survive in bad positions for a long time. That's how I would sum up a couple of your matches here. But it kicks things off with Andre Porfirio here. We were kind of talking about this too. I do think you had one of the sickest kits collections out of everybody at ADCC.
Yeah. Thank you. No, yeah. So I mean, I had a couple matches. I was definitely disappointed because in a lot of the matches, I was in finishing positions, but like you said, like a lot of guys were just able to survive. But I think one of the things that's interesting and that is one of the positives, I would say, it's kind of hard to look at it as a positive because you want to have like a dominant kind of flawless performance. But, there was a lot of matches where, not a lot, but there was a few moments in a few of my matches where I was kind of in like here, I get taken down early in the second match, things like that, near back takes, near passes. And I think to a certain degree, a lot of people can relate to that more. A lot of the viewers, especially the people that watch jiu-jitsu, both from an excitement perspective, but also from a perspective of learning, because it's hard to relate to matches a lot of times where, and as grapplers, you always pursue that, but it's hard to relate to matches a lot of times where the guy just smokes people. And when you see somebody who can get out of bad positions, stay calm in those positions, and then still come out and win, I think that it's not only relatable, but it's one of those things that is, from the perspective of the viewer and from the perspective of somebody who's looking to learn, is good to see because you don't just get to see the good. You don't just get to see the highlights. You get to see, the bad spots that you're in and how you have to put yourself, how you have to pull through in those moments, both from a psychological perspective. It's easy to put yourself in bad positions sometimes in the training room and be like, it is what it is. You're just going against your training partners. Maybe you're used to them. But when you have somebody who's, high level grappler on the biggest stage and this is his moment, he's going against the defending champion. He's like, okay, I'm on his back. I got to take down. Now is my time to finish, and he's just giving 100%, and you can just feel their strength and everything come through. I think that's relatable, and a lot of people can learn from that. On one side, it was like, I was never really nervous in these positions because I'm just so used to them, and I train them every day. I'm pretty confident in my defensive ability, but it is something that you don't that people watching it can definitely learn from. And I kind of equate it to like the early days of Roger Gracie. Like I have a hard time finding a Roger Gracie match, especially in his early days, where it's like he almost like agreed to start the match 2-0. You know what I mean? Like he was either getting taken down or getting his guard passed, and he would somehow come through and get to the win. So I think that was definitely a big influence for me. And you kind of saw that in a few instances in this tournament. Where in hindsight, I think it was a positive thing to look at. Obviously, if you're sitting in a corner and your guy's getting his back taken, you're like, oh shit, like this is a bad spot to be in. Mm-hmm. But I think in hindsight, it is there's a lot of value. There's a lot of value in that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think for one, there's certain aspects where it's like, to tell a good story, there has to be some adversity, So it's like, if you want it to be like an all-time classic match, there does need to be some adversity, some back and forth. Yeah. I know, like, as an athlete and as, like, someone who just wants to go out and probably dominate and submit as fast as you can, like, that's not always, like, fun in the moment, but, like, looking back as a fan, like, it does make it exciting, Yeah. The other aspect, too, is most hobbyists probably can relate more to having their back almost taken 90% of the time than dominating dudes anyway. So you are right. It kind of, the fans relate. But then there's an aspect where, and I don't know, maybe you felt this, maybe you didn't, like coming back as the returning champion, people are coming at you. Like Gabriel Almeida in that second match, or like immediately was just coming at you. He knew he needed to kind of like bring it to you right away because you're kind of held at like a much higher regard now. Did you feel that at all? Did you seem like that was kind of at play?
I definitely did. And it's not something that I put a ton of thought into ahead of time. Like I was prepared for it, but I wasn't like, thinking ahead of time, like, oh, these guys are, like thinking that this is their moment or this and that. Like I very much had a approach to my training and the way that I, my composure and my just the way that I felt in the matches that is very emotionless, if you will. I try not to, and it doesn't really take much for me. It's not something that I really have to, overly think about, or, occasionally you're going to get in your own head in the training room. And it's really those like last couple weeks beforehand that you feel the most pressure, if you will, where, maybe you have a bad training session and you're thinking like, fuck, if I perform like this in the tournament, I'm screwed, like that kind of stuff. But I think at the end of the day, like I really was able to see all the progress that I made. And I had so much confidence in my preparation that when I was in situations that were less than favorable, I really didn't bat an eye. Like I was very, very calm. And that's kind of historic with me. If you look at a lot of my matches, the one thing that people do say about me is that you always have kind of the same face and you're always very, very calm. And so it's something that I'm comfortable with. I'm not afraid to be in bad position and take risks that will potentially put me in bad positions, because ultimately, like you said, that's what's going to make those historic matches. And people like drama, like people like these back and forth matches that I don't feel like I was ever in, a situation where I was being dominated, but there was definitely some times where I was at a disadvantage, and I felt comfortable there.
Yeah, I don't think we're scored on, right?
No.
Yeah,
no.
So I mean, but that's also kind of the beauty of ADCC. You get that no points period where it's like both guys can open up, create some crazy situations and stuff,
Yeah, and I like to read guys. I feel like in the last couple of years, my ability to be able to shift my tactics and really read my opponents has gotten so much better, like, with my competitive experience and with like my mat time in competition and in the training room. Like I always take the previous competition when I come back into the training room. I always try to address whatever happened in the tournament, both good and bad, immediately in the training room. So for me, I think that was a huge kind of catalyst for that, was just being able to take those past experiences and work on them in the training room. And when I came down to it in the next competition, I was just way more comfortable.
What goes into kind of reading your opponents more? Like,
so I mean, I like to think that I have a good ability to be able to switch up my strategies kind of mid-match. I think that's a huge skill set that takes a lot of time to develop. So, in a lot of my matches, either one, guys were throwing their best moves at me from the beginning, where I was a little bit more chill. And there's definitely certain things that go into that. For ADCC specifically, there's a no points period, which, you don't want to be 100% relaxed, because if it does come down to a ref decision and the guy, passed you or swept you or whatever the case is in the early moments, like they're going to take that into consideration for sure. But for me, especially when there's no points on the board, you saw that there was a couple matches where, I had my guard passed and I didn't really fight it very much, or there was takedown situations where I didn't have to scrimmage as much. Obviously, I'm not looking to get caught in a terrible position, but I didn't really have to scrimmage or go crazy as much for a multitude of reasons. Energy expenditure, is it really worth it? Am I comfortable in the position that I'm in? All of these things you got to take into consideration kind of at a moment's notice. And so that does give me an ability to kind of read, what my opponent's looking for. Is he looking to get on top? Like if he really wanted to play top position, is he going to take the risk and try to take me down in a no points period? Like little things like that you have to kind of at a moment's notice be able to take a read on, and then just adapt your game plan based on that. And so I think through competitive experience and like time in the training room, really understanding the rule set and things like that, that's what kind of allowed me to be able to make those adjustments mid-match to be able to come out on top, even though there were some moments where I was, if you look at it just on the surface, I was behind. But in my mind, I didn't really see myself as behind. I just saw myself as, these are just a couple minutes where I'm figuring things out.
For sure. What kind of questions you got, Corey? I know you're sitting over there on a few, waiting.
In those matches, right, where they're a little bit more chaotic and scrambly, and a lot of things happen. Obviously, it's more fun for us as the viewer, the fans, the audience to watch those matches that are not just single-sided dominant. Do you have a chance after, let's say, a J-Rod match or an Andre Porfirio match or a Felipe Costa match to look back and say, man, that was fun. Like that was a fun match to be in. Like J-Rod and you have had a couple of crazy matches that kind of go all over the place.
Yeah.
Do you get a chance to reflect on that?
Yeah, especially with this last one, because just based on like the reactions of the people watching it, and just saying how that was one of the more exciting matches that they've seen all year. I think that that's definitely a positive. You know, I don't want to just be a guy that wins. I want to be a guy that people remember and like to watch. And so for me, that's definitely like a positive thing. And so I think after that match in particular, just because it was kind of the end of the division and now you can kind of take a little break, watch the rest of the finals, and then, you know, get ready for the absolute, I was able to kind of soak in on that and obviously be happy that I won. But like, I genuinely enjoyed that experience, you know what I mean? And I felt that after, you know, it's not just the like euphoric feeling of winning. Maybe it would have been different if I would have not won the match, but there is also like, you know, that was just a fun match to be a part of, you know. And I felt as though, you know, there were moments where maybe I had to dig deep, and, you know, one of the things that Gordon said after, he was like, that was a champions final. That wasn't just like, you know, any other match. Like, that was one that you really had to win that match. And so even though on the surface, for I would say the most of the later portion of the match, I was pretty much in the driver's seat and controlling it, and took his back multiple times, you know, finished the match I think 8 or 9-0. It was definitely, you know, it was back and forth for at least the first half of the match, and that's something that I, you know, expected, especially with him and, you know, the threats that he poses. But yeah, I think that was definitely a champions match, and I was, you know, at the end of it, like looking back and rewatching the match, I was just happy to have been a part of it.
For sure. I mean, definitely that was one of the most exciting matches from ADCC, in my opinion. We got to kind of highlight from that. Let's go ahead and roll the Giancarlo J-Rod final here. With someone like J-Rod, I feel like poses an interesting threat for everybody because his movement and stuff is so crazy. Like, I feel like what he lacks, and maybe like, I mean, obviously he knows a ton of jiu-jitsu. I'm not saying that, but it's just like he just uses so much athleticism, so much side-to-side movement. Does that kind of pose like a different threat to you? Do you approach a match with someone like J-Rod differently or anything?
Yeah, I mean, you can't be so tunnel vision that you try to approach every athlete the same. So there's that period of time where you're looking to get a read for what they want, and you're looking to get a read for how they're feeling, you know, because they might be one athlete early in the tournament, they might be a different athlete later in the tournament. So I think, you know, as far as, you know, my versatility of techniques, I was able to make those adjustments. As far as like, you know, things that he had on me, as, you know, I would say advantages, you got to give him speed, you got to give him explosiveness, and, you know, some people could even argue, you know, cardio, which, you know, it does play a role for sure, but I think, you know, your efficiency and your tactics are the biggest, are kind of the biggest determining factors to how your cardio plays out. You know, it's one thing having good cardio, you know, in the gym or in the training room, and then there's another aspect to where, you know, in competition, you have to be efficient. You know, you have to know how to have a high output, but also conserve your energy at the same time. So towards the end of the match, I felt as though, you know, I mean, I felt I could have done the full 40 minutes, no problem. Whereas, and I think if we would have been tied at the end of the 20 minutes, I would have been at a huge advantage in those later overtime periods, just based on how well conditioned I was, not necessarily in part due to my, you know, physical preparation. Like, I did put a lot of time over the last 2 years to kind of try to make myself as physically imposing as I could, but also just based on, you know, my efficiency, like how, you know, well I was able to gauge, like, you know, my energy output throughout the match, you know, to make it so that, you know, by the end of the match, I was not only more active, but I was also in a better condition to be able to keep pushing when it mattered. And so I think that was definitely huge.
What's going through your mind at this point in the match? You know, you're like, we're at I think it's like the 12-minute mark in the match. An insane amount of positions have already been cycled through, you know, like what's going through your mind here?
Honestly, like, I really feel as though I do a good job of tuning out the things that don't matter. And I was just kind of laser focused on what needed to be done at that moment. So whatever it was that he was presenting in front of me, I was just addressing that while still trying to get to the positions that I wanted to. And so I felt as though I did a really good job of reacting to his attacks appropriately. And so I wasn't really focused on anything outside of, you know, what's happening at this very moment, like what's directly in front of me, And how do I
Slip right there.
Yeah, the mats were extremely slippery. That's one thing that a lot of people don't realize is after day one, like the mats were slick on day one for sure. But after day one, the next morning I came in, a couple hours early and I just stepped on the mats and I talked to a couple people and I was like, dude, I don't know what you guys did to clean these mats, but they are freaking slick.
Especially on any logos. Like, it's like those logos are like so slick. Like it's almost like I'm like, I don't know, we might need to rethink this logo on the mats thing in some way, because it's like there's a lot of matches where people slip kind of in that same way. Yeah,
no, I felt that for sure. I mean, I knew that was going to be an issue just that morning when I stepped on the mats just to feel them, because somebody had mentioned that to me the night before. They were like, hey, they clean the mats and they're really slippery. One guy even suggested that I compete in wrestling shoes, and I was like, well, that's kind of dumb, but
yeah, I wouldn't do that.
Yeah, I was like,
very low.
Like, but man, they're so freaking slippery. Like you might have to wear shoes, and I was like, I would rather take the slipperiness than wear shoes.
Yeah, bro.
You're not going to be able to get out of anything if you have shoes on. But they were definitely very greasy. I don't know if it's because of the material that they clean the mats with or what, but yeah, I definitely noticed that.
In this is a funny little a wholesome exchange, I think, between you and J-Rod as the match is winding down here. You guys are both talking a lot. You're talking to the corner. What's going on right here? Do you remember what you're saying or anything?
Yeah, so my corner was talking to me. I can't remember if it was Gordon or John or who it was, but they were talking to me about, because he had my ankle. He had fallen back on an ankle lock. And he just kind of had that Achilles grip wrapped up. And from that particular position, when the feet are on the outside like that, it's really kind of a waiting game as far as like, I was in a good position putting pressure on him, but, he was holding on tight to my leg to avoid the back exposure. And really, just from a mechanical standpoint, there's nothing you can do to extract your leg. It's more so like a pressure over time, getting the guy to release the leg. So my corner was asking me to extract the leg. And I remember looking back at my corner and telling them, hey, like he's holding my Achilles, like I can't, extract my leg. And they knew what I was talking about. So they were like, okay, that's fine. And then the referee gives me a warning. And so I look at the ref and I'm like, dude, it's mechanically impossible for me to move my leg. Like I literally said that. I was like, I literally cannot pull my leg out in this moment. And that scenario actually happened a couple of times in different matches. I think the Porfirio match and the Wagner match. And so I talked to the corner, I talked to the ref, then J-Rod covered my mouth. And so then I just I covered his mouth. And we talked to each other a couple of times during the match. We talked to our corners a few times during the match. And it was just like a funny like situation. It was definitely like a wholesome thing,
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Do you like talking during a match? I feel like some people do, some people don't.
I don't really like go out of my way to do it, but I don't have a problem doing it either, So like I said, like there was a couple of times where I could feel him getting tired, and he kept trying to hit this pass by that he was doing early in the match, and I told him, I was like, you've done that too many times now, I know it's coming. And he's like, I know, and he was just like really tired, and he was just like shaking his head. And then there was like that little scenario, and then when I was on his back, I scored a couple times from the back, and I think Gordon was telling me to like threaten the neck and reinsert the hooks and try to like rack up a score, and he was just like looking at the corner. He's like, that's not fair, So there was a few moments where it was happening, but it was pretty funny.
There's a future podcast draft there for the best mid-match shit talkers.
Yeah, true. I mean, obviously number one's got to be Wagner. I mean, do you know anyone who can?
Me and Wagner talked to each other a couple times during the match. Like we literally had a full-blown conversation because and I didn't start it. He started it for sure. He was definitely probably trying to distract me or something. But it was right when we were fighting, and Mika was going against Dante on the match next to us, and Dante had just submitted Mika. And like we're wrestling, and then I kind of see him look, and the crowd goes crazy, and I see him kind of take a couple step backs away from me and like look over. And I'm just like, I'm not going to look over there because he's probably like either one trying to bait me and two, I was like, I'm just focused. So I'm like, I'm not going to look over. And he goes like, Dante just submitted Mika. And I was like, no shit. And he's like, yeah, he just submitted him. And I guess he's friends with Mika and I'm friends with Dante. So I was like, well, I'm happy for Dante. And he's like, yeah, me too. But kind of sucks for Mika. And like, we just had this like little back and forth about what was happening in the match next to us. So that was pretty funny. But yeah, I guarantee he was probably hoping that I would have looked over and then he would have like shot on me or something like that.
Yeah.
You know. But yeah, that was the other match where I think it was just those two matches where we talked to each other. It was the J-Rod and the Wagner.
Yeah, I would never trust something going on
Yeah.
with Wagner during a match. Like I would honestly, if I was competing against Wagner, I wouldn't trust anything with that guy like leading up. Like,
Oh, no,
dude
no.
loves the mental game so much.
100%,
Like,
dude. Yeah, he's made a lot of his career on that. And I was tempted to look over because I knew that they were fighting. And the crowd did go crazy, and I was like, "Oh, something cool just happened."
Yeah.
But I was like, "No, I can't. I got to be like locked in." Right now.
Did you go back and watch it or anything?
I saw the highlight. I saw the finish on Instagram. That was really good finish.
For sure. The other thing I wanted to ask you about from kind of your competition specific stuff, we saw you do it a few times. I think a few times in the J-Rod match and then also against Felipe Costa is wrestling out the back door. It seems like that's not something you see a lot in jiu-jitsu. It's pretty common in like wrestling disciplines, you know, but is that something you work specifically on, something you're just privy to or just find yourself there?
Yeah, so like specifically there were some wrestle ups from guard that we had been working on in the training room that, you know, I felt that just kind of blended into my game really well. So there was a couple times I think in the both in the J-Rod and in the Felipe Costa match, I'm pretty sure there was a couple times where I came out from reverse de la Hiva and came out to their back. And then there was a couple times in the J-Rod match where, you know, I hit that Iranian, which is something I've been doing for a long time, really since like my blue belt time. That's a technique that I've always liked and I've had a lot of success with in the training room. I did have a moment towards the end of my last match with Barbosa where I hit that, but time ran out, so I wasn't able to use it to get on top. So I hit it a couple of times on J-Rod, and you know, it worked out. But that's definitely something that was really valuable for me. It worked really well. You know, it blended really well into my game. And we did train, particularly the reverse de la Hiva ones, you know, a lot over the course of the year and for this camp specifically. So, I mean, you guys saw it there. It worked out pretty well.
Yeah, that's one aspect where maybe the jiu-jitsu world as a whole doesn't know, you know, but when you get a little sneak peeks in, I feel like the New Wave camp always kind of has like a couple specific things they're doing in lead up to camps, you know? Was that kind of one of the emphasis, or can you shed any light on kind of what the emphasis for this one?
Yeah.
I learned that backtracking stuff was probably
that was
big
huge.
emphasis.
I mean, like, so Jon is always trying to stay ahead of the curve, as you guys know. Like, he's always, I feel like whatever people are working on now is stuff that, you know, we were working on 6 months ago. And when he starts to see trends come out in jiu-jitsu, he likes to already have us working on the next trend so that we're not like, you know, if there's an ankle lock trend, like we're not just doing it while everybody else is doing it. You know what I mean? It's not to say that, you know, we're the only trendsetters in the sport, but I do like to, I think it kind of goes without saying that Jon does kind of have that little bit of an edge where he watches everybody and he's able to see. I mean, he's legitimately predicted 2 years ago, like in 6 months, people are going to be doing this. In a year, people are going to be doing that, and it happens. So people are going to be doing this. That means that we need to be doing that, you know? So that's definitely a huge part of our camps. And I mean, I think we're really lucky to be able to have somebody that just has eyes on everything and is able to see those things coming and, you know, be ahead of the curve like that. And so, yeah, that's a huge part of all of our camps. And specifically for ADCC, I think, you know, he's very good, and it's very difficult to do this, you know, I think in any area of life, but to play the long game. And so he's so patient and so willing to just make little incremental adjustments and kind of improvements on a day-to-day basis that ultimately build up to something big. Whereas, you know, I think for most people, we are always looking for something that's immediate, you know? And so having somebody who's willing to say, all right, let's just take it one day at a time. Let's game plan for the next 6 months. Let's game plan for the next 12 months. And let's game plan for the next 2 and 5 years. Like, he literally thinks that far ahead. You know, where he's not worried about what's going to happen in the next week. He's concerned about, okay, how is this going to impact us in 5 years? And so I think if I'm training solo, it's very difficult to do that because you don't have that kind of bird's eye view where you have one guy watching every single person in the training room, watching all of their potential opponents, watching all the matches, not just in jiu-jitsu, but in all different elements. Like even just yesterday, we're in the training room and he's like, hey, there was a guy, you know, during the Olympics that was this move was working really well. I think we could tweak it and make it good for jiu-jitsu. And we're there and we're experimenting. This is just a couple weeks after ADCC. And where normally people would just be kind of relaxing in the training room and, you know, just kind of training for fun. Like he's already thinking like, how can we incorporate this to be beneficial for us in the next ADCC, which is 2 years away. And so I think that you're absolutely right. There's always something that he's working on, and we are collectively working on in the training room. That's to be ahead of be ahead of trends and kind of set new trends. And the cool thing about, I think, our training room is that, yes, we are all learning from Jon, and we all kind of have those same systems that we branch all of our games off of. But I really like and appreciate his ability to kind of hand us the reins and say, hey, here's something that I think would be good for you specifically, or even the whole training room specifically. Play around with it and see what you can come up with. And so while we all have a lot of similar systems that we base our games off of, there's no like limit to the amount of technique and detail and nuance and variation in a single technique in jiu-jitsu. Like how many freaking armbar variations are there? How many armbar defenses are there that you have to create new reactions for? So all of our games, while they kind of come from the same, seed that he plants, myself, Gordon, Gary, Nicholas, so on and so forth, Luke, we can all kind of have our own spin off of it, which I think is really cool because it makes it so that, you don't have these same athletes in every single match. You have guys that we can talk to each other and we can speak the same language, but we're all going to have a different take on things. We're all going to have different series that we like. So we're all going to have, different takes on a similar system. And so I think that adds a lot of value, and it also makes training fun and interesting, because it's not like this, copy and paste method. It's very much a kind of experimental, and you're allowing things to kind of happen naturally. And then once you go into camps and you've developed those skills, now it's like, okay, now we just need to hone in on this stuff. That's what makes camps kind of, brutal, because you're doing the same stuff every single day, but you take that small chunk of time and then you take the time that you have outside of that. I think that's what makes it interesting, and that's what allows you to 2 years from now, like you saw, like me versus 2022 versus 2024, new skills, new grappler, and that's kind of what keeps me, in the game.
Is there a person or a couple people in the room at New Wave that are just like really interesting innovators? Like Jon says, hey, let's work on this thing, and somebody just has a really cool take on it, or a really cool interpretation of how to play that.
Yeah, I think, obviously you have the top guys in our training room, which all have very different styles and very different personalities. So, I mean, early on and even to this day, I learn a lot from, a guy who's got a completely different style than me, which is Gary, and I like to take stuff from his game and try to, implement into my game. And I feel as though I've always learned the most over the course of my career from rolling with people, not just asking them questions, which I like doing, but rolling with them and just feeling what they do, and then trying to implement that on other people in the training room. So, in my time when I was training with Lepre, I got to roll with, obviously he was teaching, but like I got to roll with him a lot. I can just take this off.
Oh yeah.
I got to roll with him a lot, and so that allowed me to, be able to pick up a lot of things that maybe he wasn't articulating because he wasn't conscious of it, or because it wasn't what the whole rest of the classroom needed. But it just allowed me to kind of be able to absorb things from actually feeling it, like in a live scenario. And so I think just based on where I am now in my grappling, the guys that are able to perform those things at the highest level are the ones that I'm absorbing the most from.
Is there ever a time when you guys set out on a new trend and you go, damn, this ain't it, and you abandon the trend? Like you realize like, we're kind of going down a dead end here, actually.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, like Jon will literally throw stuff at us and he'll say, experiment with this. Let's play around with that. He'll take us after class, and sometimes we'll spend hours going over stuff, and he'll say, hey, what do you think about this? Okay, try it with a little bit of resistance and increase resistance. And then when we feel like that's not working, and maybe this is bullshit, let's get rid of it. Let's throw. So there's definitely a lot of that. I would say that there's a lot of times there's more stuff that you get rid of than there is stuff that you keep, because there's so many variables to what makes a move work, that if you don't think it can really, really work at the highest level against a bunch of different styles and a bunch of different, physical, different physicalities and stuff like that, it's probably better to dump it and pick something that's reliable, So there's definitely a lot of that for sure.
Yeah, you guys gave a lot of love to Jon around this ADCC and stuff. You shouted him out. Mary Golly was talking very highly of him. Everyone on that team, talks about how important Jon is. I think there are very few people I think that are as dedicated and as focused on like their purpose in life than I think like Jon Daner is.
Yep.
One example, just being like a small example, I can't remember if it was either the youth championship or the ADCC Open, like the days before the actual world championship. He was sitting mat side, just watching random matches, like of either like 8-year-olds or like just random, like I could have entered this Open. He could have been watching my match. And he has a notepad and he's just sitting there watching and writing notes. And I'm like, that's insane. That like, he just like is that deep in the game that he's got like, I got to sit here and just see what like this random crew of people are doing in their jiu-jitsu matches and just taking notes on it.
I always tell people, like, you don't really understand it unless you're in the thick of it for a long time. Like, it's one thing you come in, you train for a week with us, and you're like, oh, that's awesome. Like, that's Jon Daner. Like, he's, but like, when you're in it for, as long as, and for me, like 3 years training full-time under Jon, it isn't even really that long if you really put into perspective how far ahead he thinks. Mm-hmm. But when you're in it, you're just like, dude, this guy's not human. Like, this is just like crazy. And he is there, like, I'm no joke, every single day, every single session, there could be 2 people on the mat. I've literally been in training sessions where it was me and one other guy. And I've been in training sessions where there's 100 people on the mat. And it doesn't matter to him who's on the mat. He still has a job to do. And so, like, you really can't give him enough credit. Like, he's never asked us for anything. I've known Jon personally for like 5 years now, trained with him for 3 years full time. And the impact that he's made on me, but not even just me, like the entire jiu-jitsu world, I think it's crazy. Like, you really can't look at a single athlete nowadays and say, this guy hasn't learned something from Jon. This guy hasn't studied one of his instructionals. This guy hasn't, watched some of our guys' tapes or tried to pick up something. Like, I've seen high-level athletes, ADCC medalists that have nothing to do with our team. They're watching his instructionals, and like, it just kind of goes without saying, like, the impact that he's made, but like, you don't really understand it unless you're there every single day. Like, you guys come in and you watch us for a couple days at a time and you guys see it. And then, so imagine like if you're there every single day, it's really hard to have that amount of like discipline and like dedication to something, no matter how much you love it. Like, at some point you want to pull yourself away from it. Like, he just doesn't. Like, if he could be traveling, he's still doing jiu-jitsu, he's still studying tape, he's still coming back from a 2-week trip of filming or teaching seminars, and he's like, oh, I was in my hotel room at 1 a.m. and I was watching this match and I think we should really focus on it. Or he'll send us match footage on WhatsApp and he'll just be like, hey, what do you think about this? Like, so it's just like, it's like full immersion to the point that you really, like, you're just like, how is it even possible that he's still like, 1 is still learning stuff, 2 still developing stuff, and still interested. And he'll go back and like rewatch matches from the 90s and be like, oh, this guy was, this worked really well in like one particular match. Like, let's work on it. Let's do it. Like, it's like a level of dedication that, I mean, that's why he is who he is, and that's why like he's done what he's done. But it's kind of hard to comprehend. Like, you really have to be there every single day, and even then, you're just like, I don't understand how this is possible.
That influence too is like, it's tangible in the language of the sport. Like, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, inside Ashi or what was single leg X or this leg entanglement or that leg, and now it has kind of a thread that maybe 80-85% of the jiu-jitsu community calls it Ashi versus this versus that. And it's, I mean, you hear that, we go and visit gyms and you hear people talking about camping, talking about backtracking, and those are things that maybe were not 100% originated by Jon, but were definitely at least popularized by Jon. And in some places, for sure, originated by Jon.
Yeah.
You always know, too, like on the hobbyist level, just like training with other hobbyists and stuff, who's a big time new wave like
Yeah.
John or Gordon like instructional watcher.
Yeah.
You'll just have like some random like brown belt, like middle-aged overweight guy, and he's like talking about camping, and I'm like, dude, what the hell? What's going on right now? What are you worried about camping for, bro? Just like just go out there and freaking whatever.
We got a lot of ride or die guys for sure.
Definitely. But yeah, I guess like we can kind of start wrapping this up. But is there anything, Giancarlo, you got? I know you got a lot of seminars coming up. You got the YouTube going. You know, what all are you doing on that front? Where should people be watching and checking out the stuff Giancarlo has going on?
Yeah, I mean, like I got this seminar tour in Europe that I've been planning for a couple months now. So I'll be there for 6 weeks. So I actually leave Monday. I'll be teaching in Italy. I'll be teaching in Greece. I'll be teaching in Israel. I'll be teaching in Austria, Germany, Norway, Spain. Where else? Bunch of other places. I can't even remember all of them.
Czech Republic.
Czech Republic. Yeah, that's one I'm excited to go to. So there's a bunch of seminars that I have planned there. Probably be doing more in North America too. I'd like to do a tour out here. You know, it just kind of started off where it was like I got invited to like 1 or 2 things in Europe, and then it started kind of building, and I said, screw it, we'll just take a chunk of time and we'll just do as many as I can in Europe. And then, I'd like to be teaching more seminars in the States as long as it fits in with, competitive schedule. YouTube's always something that I'm trying to work on. We'll be recording pretty much everything from that trip, so there'll be a lot of content, being pushed out there. Instructionals, we just released one. We have another one on the horizon. I'll be filming a bunch more for BJ Fanatics. And then, recently this year, I launched my own jiu-jitsu camp that we started calling Grapple in Paradise. So January, we have the next one, which will be in Costa Rica, which I'm super pumped for. Like, we kind of just did it on a whim, did our first one in Hawaii earlier this year. It was freaking awesome. This one's going to be 10 times better. So it's kind of like a jiu-jitsu vacation, so we'll have a bunch of activities, 2 training sessions a day, a bunch of stuff in Costa Rica. And then I think we have at least 3 or 4 more planned this year, including Texas. So we'll be doing something local here as well.
Right on.
So yeah, YouTube, instructionals, seminars, Euro tours coming up. And then, Grapple in Paradise, that's something that I would like to have most of my teaching kind of outside of the day-to-day and the online stuff, pushing more towards that, because I'm a little bit more in control of the schedule, and I can, kind of plan it around tournaments. And so, yeah, next one we have coming up is in Costa Rica.
Do you have other instructors coming to that too, or just?
So for this next one, it'll be just me, but we do want to have other instructors, not just from my team, but probably from other teams. So we're working on it right now. Costa Rica will be the next one, and then I think the one after that will be Texas in the spring. And so I'm sure we'll have some local guys coming in and guys and girls coming in and helping us with that.
Nice. I was watching your YouTube channel the other day. You kind of got a good range of content on there now. You have like the pre-ADCC flow rounds and all kinds of rounds, and then you even have like the what it takes to be a blue belt guide and stuff, which I feel like a lot of people are out there looking for that type of info. My brother started jiu-jitsu not that long ago, and he's always hitting me up with these like super like I just started jiu-jitsu type of questions. He's like asking me like, what do you think I gotta do to get my white belt? And I was like, first of all, I'll just give you a blue belt. I was like, I'll just give you a blue belt. Come on, who cares? But so that's a great source. So anybody out there, go check out Giancarlo's YouTube. I think if you just search Giancarlo Bodoni, surely it'll pop up, and there's a bunch of great stuff there. So
yeah, we're really trying to grow the YouTube channel, and like not just having techniques in there, but like more stuff like that. And we have a ton of footage from ADCC, like the week of, and during the tournament and stuff like that we'll be releasing some cool like pre-training or pre-competition like training footage, stuff about my weight cut, stuff about like during the tournament and behind the scenes stuff. So
nice.
There's a lot of stuff in these next couple of days that I'm going to have to sift through and actually put together and edit and work on. But we got a lot of cool stuff planned for that. So it's a lot of work, as you guys already know, but we're going to make it happen.
Definitely. Well, thanks for coming on the show. You were our first in-studio guest, and now it's nice to have you back around as a 2-time ADCC champion. So thanks for tuning in. Everybody watching, make sure you like and subscribe. Go over to Giancarlo's YouTube, subscribe to him as well. Leave a comment on some of his recent videos. Spread the love, and we'll see you all in the next video.
See you guys.